Welcome back to Watercolor Studio 42. Today I'm going to wing it a little bit. I made a little quick sketch, and I mean a little quick sketch of what was on my dining room table. A vase of flowers and a little box of chocolates and a lot of cards and so forth. And not often do we have flowers, but it was from our children for our anniversary. I won't say how many years, but we've been married quite a few, which is fine with me. But let's see where we're at. Now, I made a quick sketch in pencil, and then what I do is a lot of times I'll go over and make the lines a little bit heavier with the permanent marker. Now I must emphasize, you want to make sure if you're using ink, make sure it's permanent ink, because when you deal with water, obviously if it's not permanent ink, it's going to blur, and you're going to be all frustrated, or, you know, what the heck. But anyway, I'm just going to do this. Now, like I said, when I do anything, a lot of times it's more spontaneous as far as the sketch goes. Sometimes you obviously have to slow down a bit and get a little bit more fussy with detail. But when you're doing something that's just sort of off the cuff and just exercises and so forth. So now, this is what I do. I could start off just going around some of my pencil marks. Now, if I'm going to do a rose, I usually start and kind of spiral around and so forth, and put the shape of the rose in. Now, I got a marker that might not have been too good, so let's try this again. Okay. Well, that's showing up a little bit better. Let's try some of these others over here. I may have to use a regular pen here. All right, let's try one of these. It's a little bit larger than I normally would work with, but nevertheless, we'll see what happens. Okay, here's a spiral, and I'm going to make sort of a rose in here. This is the bouquet, and I'm kind of doing this from memory because it would have been a little bit tricky to try to carry in a vase of flowers with water in the bowl and all that. So that gets a little bit tricky. So these, I'm just going to do some little spirals in here. Put some of those in. And then a regular flower, it's like a donut. You know, it has a center, and then you kind of come out here with the petals, you know, out around the outside. And it's sort of like a donut shape. There's quite a few of those in there too. You know, when you get a bouquet, you get a kind of a little bit of a mix of flowers. And in this case, they're very colorful. And sometimes when you get a vase with flowers, usually they're kind of tight. They're kind of tight together, so they don't leave as much space around things as you'd like to see. Let's go a little bit over here. Just a little bit over here. Okay. Now, the vase is in here. Okay. And then what was next to that was a little box of kind of candies. You know how they have those candies that are kind of wrapped in foil type of thing? A little package of that. I'll show some of the box there. And then over and back, quite a few cards. Quite a few anniversary cards here. Lately, it's been either birthdays or anniversaries, not so much anniversaries, but a lot of birthday cards. We got 2 or 3 people that have had birthdays in May and so forth. Then there's some little bit of fern that comes up in here. Markers aren't working too good because I kind of wet the paper ahead of time, but anyways, so what's happening with the markers, they're coming out a little lighter than what I would care for, but probably enough for me to be able to see. Now, I'm just going to put like a little background wash in, and in my dining room, one of the few rooms that still has wallpaper. I think most homes now, people have got away from wallpaper and they just paint the walls sort of a light, beige colors and white and all that. So let's put a little bit of that in. Just a little bit of soft blue, and let's take some of that water down. It's a very soft background. Very soft background. There's some flower patterns in it, but the pattern is so small that it's probably something that you would probably not want to pay too much attention to because you want to focus the attention mostly onto the vase of flowers and a few items around it. So here we go, just a soft wash. And the tablecloth, you could probably get away with sort of a beige color or raw sienna. Let's put a little bit of that down in here. Something like this for now. We'll put that in. I usually keep the background a little bit softer and lighter because you want to give a little bit more attention to the objects, not so much to the table or the wallpaper and all that. So we just put a little bit of a wash into here. The big thing, I think, a lot of times is to use the big brush first and then get some of that background in there, get some color onto the paper. Somebody says the scariest thing is look down at a white piece of paper. So that's probably true in some cases. You might start off in one direction and all of a sudden you change your mind sometimes when you're sketching something out. I've never done it for myself at a demo, but there was an artist we had one time at one of the art associations and local art associations, and it wasn't in Attleboro, but out of town. Either Mansfield or Foxborough, I just forgot. But he started off in one direction, turned to the audience. He says, I don't know what the heck I'm doing here. He says, I was going to make a street scene, but I think I'm going to make it into a floral painting. So he converted it to something else, into flowers. So I don't know if my flowers are going to turn into a street scene. I don't think so. I hope not. But we'll just see how the soft the colors. Now, as I probably have mentioned before, with watercolor, when it does dry out, it absorbs into the paper, and it's going to be a lot lighter. So sometimes when you come in, you have a color, and you say, oh my gosh, that's a little bit too heavy. Well, maybe it won't be, It won't be by the time you get through. Okay, let's get some of this on here. Now, we got a soft wash around for the background table. You can always come back in and keep building that up. Let's say if I want this to be darker here, see, I just put a little bit more of a darker shade there. I might want to repeat that back here somewhere. Get distribution of the color. I do this a lot with pictures when I'm working. I probably have said it several times before. I really don't finish one particular spot or area on the paper when I'm painting. I kind of jump around a bit. And you'll probably see that happen with me, whether I mention it sometimes or not. But it's a distribution of color. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 places. Okay. I usually make the base across the bottom a little bit darker, so it gives you some foundation there. A little bit of base color. Lately I've been using masking tape, masking it around and creating a sort of a false a white mat around my artwork. Okay. I don't know if you've noticed, also I got the easel intact. We thought we'd add another something in the background, and because it looked like kind of a dark background to kind of fill in that space. And what we've been doing is putting up the painting, the pictures that I've done the previous week, and that's the one I did last time. The botanical desert. It could be anywhere out west, Arizona or whatever. Now, here we go. Now, I'm using a big brush. I always start off with a big brush. Always start off. A lot of times when you're first starting off, you buy brushes, and you buy all these little thin brushes and small brushes, the low numbered ones, 1, 2s, and 3s, so forth. But you do want to get a larger brush. This happens to be a flat 1 inch, and it's good for what I'm doing right now, putting in the wash in the background. Now, I'm going to see if I can kind of wing this a little bit here. Now, in the vase of flowers, there's yellow, there's some yellow flowers, there's blue, purplish flowers, and then there's some, I guess I mentioned, did I mention red? Some reds, okay. So it's a little mix of everything. The blue flowers I don't know, and there's some other flower there that I don't know. The ones that I know, obviously, is the roses. I'm not too good at flowers. Now let's use another brush here. I'm going to pick out. I had another flat brush somewhere. Well, we don't need to use a flat brush. We can use a round. And this one here, looks like it's about a number 14. Now, I'm going to, while I'm working with some yellow, why don't we do some of the yellow flowers in here? Just put some dots in there for now. And jump around. Just to get some color on the paper. Now, I don't mind using a little bit of off color. I use yellow, Gambo's yellow, most all the time. And then I use a little bit of Rossiana into that particular color. You sort of get a gold color. Okay. Don't have to be fussy. Sometimes I count how many flowers. But when you have a vase of flowers, it's very hard to count them, so I don't worry about it. It's usually an odd number. If you got just one flower, You don't want to make 2 or have 2. It's maybe a third, an uneven number, okay? 3, 5, 7, and so forth. Now, see how I jump around? Now, wherever I can use some of this color, I know these have little gold wraps on them, so we'll put some of that in there. And the cards in the background, well, usually they're maybe a sort of, well, I know you can leave a lot of white and just be more suggestive what the picture is or the wording is on some of the cards. You don't just kind of scribble a little bit of color in there. And let's try some red now, see what we can do. Put some red in here. A little bit over here. Put something up in there. 1, 2, 3. 4, 5. Yeah, okay, something like that. Now, I did bring along some Q-tips also. Now, you can use the Q-tips if you'd like. If you want to kind of dabble around, just poke around in there. You could try that, see what happens. Sometimes you have to catch it before it dries up too much. Now the Q-tips, you can either put color on the Q-tip or you can use the Q-tip to pick up some of the color. Let's say if I wanted to put some more color, dab the Q-tip straight into your paint, and I can kind of dabble around and create some sort of texture on the softer color background. All you have to do. You don't have to press too hard. Just hit it easy. Just create some texture. Okay. It's a lot of fun. I don't know if you've ever tried doing the whole painting with Q-tips, but you don't have to always have a brush. All you need is some Q-tips and some cotton balls, whatever you might want to paint with. Some people use straws, they blow the paint around on the paper. You can experiment a lot with what you have. I experiment a lot, just different things. Sometimes it turns out pretty good. I save it, crop it, and make a small picture somewhere, and put a little mat on it. But whatever. These are supposed to be. It's supposed to be like roses. Now I can still eventually get back to making them into roses. If I so desire. What do we got? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. A little color in there. A little bud. How's that? Okay, now let's put this Q-tip up here somewhere, and let's try doing some blues. We could do the Q-tip again on some of the blues. Now, I think I saved 2 areas. Maybe they can be blue. You can just put some paint on your Q-tip. Now, you can kind of use the Q-tip like a brush, but it's not that easy. I think if you watered the area down and then tapped into it, I think the color would absorb into it a little bit better. Not bad. It works a little bit. See what we can do. It's all right for like starting off like a base color, a little bit. Let's see. Let's put some blues up in there. Distribution of color. Another one over here. What do we got? 1, 2, 3. Yeah, we got 5. If I finish this one off. Now you could do a whole picture. You know, paintbrushes in themselves, if you buy some halfway decent ones, they're expensive. I mean, all these brushes, they average around $3, $4, $5, $6. And then you get into some of these larger brushes, and then you're talking around beyond $10 or so. So they can get expensive. And Sable, of course, is the most expensive brush. A lot of the brushes that I have is a combination of synthetic material and Sable, a combination between the two. Now, the difference with a natural hair brush is supposedly it holds more water, okay? We're talking about minimal amount of water, of course. But a hairbrush tends to hold more. Whereas they say if it's all plastic imitation hairbrushes, they don't hold as much water. But there's not a lot of difference. The only thing with synthetic brushes, after a while, when they start wearing out, they sort of get fuzzy. You know, they kind of break down and whatnot. And so a natural brush will probably tend to lose some of its hair, you know, fall out, whatever. Okay. That's it. You see, I'm just kind of working around getting some color in there. And I can always hide, if I don't like a particular thing, I hide it. I can hide it with another color or another flower or a leaf or something. Some green, put some green in there. Now usually a regular vase of flowers, a lot of times when you order a vase of flowers, they really pack it tight with flowers. It's even tighter than a chocolate box sometimes, you know, all the chocolates all kind of bunched together a little bit. And so when you do a painting a lot of times, you can use a little bit of liberty with it and kind of open things up, you know, a little bit more. Allow a little bit more space in there. And kind of what I do is when I use the leaves and things, I kind of give it a little bit more flair, like a fountain type of texture. So what I'm going to do now, we'll go back to using a brush again. Let's use this one, and this one's a pretty good brush. You don't want to buy a brush that doesn't have resilience. You want your brush, see, to be able to pop back. But if they go limp, it's not a very good brush. But if they pop back and hold the shape, that's a good brush. Okay? You don't have to go out and buy an awful lot of brushes. You probably can get by with about 3 or 4 different brushes, various sizes, of course. Now, let's start putting some green in here. We've got some blues, so let's just put a little bit of this, some yellow, and take some of the blues and mix them in. Let's get some shades of green if we can. I don't like that particular shade of green. I think it's a little bit more blue to it. Let's see, it's a little bit dark. I'm not crazy about that batch. Let's try a little bit more up here. Here's an empty well. Let's put a little bit of this over here. And want to probably get a little bit more yellow into your green. Let's try that. That's a pretty shade of green. Okay, now you can use the brush. You can use the brush, or you can use Q-tips for a while. Dance around with the Q-tips. But if you want to make something that's going to be stringy, you probably is better off with a brush. There's some artists that just use little polka dots for their painting. The whole painting's done with polka dots. I've done some of those. Takes forever. It seems like you're tapping the paper for an awful long time. You get fill it in with all those dots. Okay. Distribution, flow. Okay. Oops. Pick that out of there. Pick it right up. Catch it while it's still wet. Let's see. I'm going to see if I can get some darker shades in here. Some shadow. Take some of this color. There's always a lot of shadow in the flowers. And if you can get something around a particular color that's darker, it's going to make that color look a lot brighter, obviously. So sometimes you can kind of poke a little shadow around in here. Like I said, you could use your Q-tips, what I'm doing right now, instead of doing it with a brush. Now, if you don't have an area that's dry yet, you know that when you put wet into wet, it's going to spread and it's going to get fuzzy. So if you want a kind of a real sharp edge, you got to let that paint dry. And that's where a lot of folks, they have trouble when they do watercolor, because they want to get at it too soon. And when you try to get at anything too soon while it's still wet, it's not going to work as well. See how that's getting fuzzy in there? Because that area was wet. I had wet that prior to, and so I'm getting all of that. Now, that's okay if you want to get something that looks like a water stain or something of that nature. You can do that. You can do this and let the paint kind of run around. And sometimes you can lift up the paper, shake it a little bit, and so forth. Now, it depends on how much you want to experiment with color. Some people just, after they get through, they just take clear water, tap the brush on it, and just make some water stains on the paper. So that works pretty good too. You could try all sorts of different things. The only trouble is you don't want to get it too overworked. I think that's one of the biggest problems with anyone, whatever you paint, whatever mediums that you use, whether it's pastels or acrylic paint or oil paint or whatever you might use. I think there's a tendency to try to do too much. And so we have to look at it and say, okay, that's it, stop. It's done, okay. Sign it and frame it or mat it and then frame it and either hang it up or sell it, right? So that's what you want to do. The only trouble lately, kind of things have slowed down quite a bit as far as being able to do a lot of art shows. I used to go down the Cape quite a bit and do some arts and craft shows around Orleans and Dennis and those areas. And everything's slowed down. We haven't got quite back to, normal again. And that's true of just about everything. We're getting there. I hopefully that we'll be getting there a little more and sooner. But getting back, it's a little bit tricky. Okay. I'm kind of experimenting a little bit with this, and what I intended to do has changed a little bit. I do that all the time. I'll start in one direction, and then let's tap it with a brush for a little while. See what I can do. But right now, what I'm working here is just getting some shadow or some dark areas underneath some of the flower shapes so that they'll show up more. Now it's still wet out there a little bit, so I can't get anything that's going to hold its shape. What's happening in here, everything's kind of getting fuzzy. Colors all blend together, which is all right. I mean, you could do that purposely and experiment with how much wet in the wet you can go. You can try these different things. When you're starting out painting, not everything is going to be a masterpiece, and you should just kind of specialize in doing a particular thing. Work on fir trees, or work on flower shapes, or work on one particular flower. And probably daisies are easy to start off with, something relatively easier, and go from there. Now what I haven't got is too much blue. I've got a couple of little blue areas, but I can also drop some blues up in there. So let's see if I can get this brush kind of cleaned off and go into some nice cleaner blue. How about up in here? Oops, wait a minute. Oh, that's all right. Drop something in there. Over here, introduce a little bit of blue. Something over there, fill in that spot. 1, 2, 3, 4. I don't know about that. See what I can do later on. A lot of times I'll start a painting and I may not know exactly what it needs. And I'll just kind of put the painting aside, let it dry out, and look at it maybe a day or two later, and come back, and I'll know what it needs to kind of finish it off, and go from there. I'm not sure what things that will do, and I just look at it and I'll say, hey, that looks okay. I'm going to leave it alone for a while and let it dry, see what happens, and look at it at another time, kind of with a fresh eye, so to speak. Maybe a little dark up in here, right underneath that one. Okay. Now, when you do this type of painting, it's mostly dabbing and doing patches. And when all of this is dry, you can come back if you want and fine-tune a couple of areas. When I say fine-tune, add just a little extra, texture or detail. And and finish it off. Here we go. A little bit blurry up in here. Okay. Now there's a certain degree of balance in there, I guess, I hope. I hope. Now the vase, you're gonna, if it's a clear vase, you're gonna see some of the stems that will come down into here. So I guess we can put some of those in. Get a little bit more of a greener color. Now those stems could be just at random, just little things that come into the vase, you know. But it'll give them a little bit of a twist. And they might be of different thicknesses and whatnot. And then the rest of the vase can be finished off with just a little bit of a slight wash. You know, kind of keep it a little bit more transparent. Come around like this. Just give it a little bit of a wash. Even that painting just clear glass or colored glass and so forth, that's a good exercise to work on. One side might have a little darker shadow. Oops. Yeah. Might have a little bit more of a shadow to it on one side. This can be right in here. All of this can be kind of tamed down, broken up a little bit. Maybe more of a solid area, you know, around the base in here. Okay, I could have hid that with a more textures of something else coming out of that. All right, let's give that a rest for a few minutes, and let's finish off some of the little things over here. This is a box. Oops. It has some clear plastic around it over the top, you know, to kind of shade or protect the candy. It's in there. Then some of the cards, they can be just sort of soft little washes. You can just give them just a little bit of texture in the background. Just a little hint of, you know, the shape of the card and whatnot. Now that's wet. See, that might get kind of fuzzy. So you might want to just kind of take some of that out of there and purposely make it look fuzzy. There you go. Something that doesn't look like a card anymore, but that's all right. We can give it a little bit of a background later on. It's something there. Okay, it's something. I'll do something over here. Kind of take some of this and put some of that off here. Okay. Now everything could have a cast shadow, so that kind of makes it too a lot of times. Putting in a little bit of a shadow across the table here. Gives it a little bit more of a base. Use something down there. You could use a larger brush too, if you want. Okay. Now, this looks fuzzy out here, but probably what I would do, I'll come back later and just give that a little bit more an edge there. There you go. A little bit too much green in there right now. So, having said that, probably could add some more dash of something else up there. I don't know if this is going to help, but nonetheless, you could try it. Put a little bit something over here. Kind of just break up the background a little bit with almost shadows and things. Thing is, you don't want to make the background over, too busy, because then it takes away from the subject. So what I would do with this. What I would do with this is take this and clean it up a little bit and sharpen up where it gets a little fuzzy. And probably you could do that with probably a permanent marker. The only problem is right now I've got so much moisture in there from the watercolor paint that the markers aren't going to work. You got to have it real dry. But I can clean it up a little bit. I'll bring it back next week and show it to you finished off here. This is a little packaging here. We can kind of go into that with a finer brush and give that just a little bit more detail. Like I said, with the cards, you can kind of bring some of those out a little bit more. This is a little bit fuzzy through here. So if anything looks kind of fuzzy, that's what you have to do. I don't know if I can go kind of soften this out. Make it look like it's more inside. Maybe I shouldn't tamper with that too much right now. So everything's right now has got to have a little bit more oomph to it, give a little bit more contrast, and probably just a little bit more texture. Maybe define some of these things a little bit more. I don't know if I need something up in there or not. I could put something in there, a little bit of green, I guess. Kind of separate some of the areas. Gets too busy, I just erase it, take it out. Take it right out of there. Okay. Now sometimes when you're experimenting with anything like this, sometimes it will work better. Sometimes it doesn't. And when you look at this right now, it needs a lot of clarification. But if I work in here now with the markers aren't going to do anything on top of the wet paint. So what I have to do is let this dry out quite a bit more and clean cut it a little bit more, and it will be a little bit sharper. Now, if it doesn't really work as well, I may have to just write it off for maybe practice, experiment, and not all experiments work. Ask some scientists that. With Thomas Edison, when he invented the light bulb, how many light bulbs did he have to design before one worked the way he wanted it to? So anyways, that's the way it is. That's too fuzzy in there. A lot of fuzzy stuff in here. Not working. That needs to be more contrast in here. So anything I put in here, other than leaving it white, will help that. Sometimes you might want to start off a little bit lighter and then say, okay, now I can keep building that up until I get that a little bit more of a contrast there. Whether we need that much white back there, probably not. So again, it's one of those things where you pull the color back away from that and maybe bring out the shape a little more, and that will work better for you, okay? So there's a lot of things that you have to do, this one here needs a lot of attention in there. And right now, what I would want to do with it is to let it dry out and then rework some darker shades and define some of the shapes a little bit more so it doesn't look quite as fuzzy. Like I said, you could do a picture. You could do a picture, and the whole thing can come out fuzzy, and that's the style. That's the style. But whatever you do, it has to be somewhat consistent. You can't all of a sudden do something, do the sky one way, and then the ground totally different from, it's got to tie in the sky with the ground and so forth. So that's what you have to do here to pull everything together. And when you first start out, you might say, oh my gosh, that's horrible. But that's because you've got to let it dry out, and then you can kind of pull things together. I had a painting one time I did up in Maine. It was it was Portland, Maine, and there's a place where it's in the old dock. They haven't redesigned it. They just have left it the way it was, maybe 100 years ago, and it's extremely rustic and so forth. But so I worked on that. And the art teacher at the time, she said, are you ever going to pull that thing together? And I did. I still have the painting. I think I still have, I hope. And I put it in an art show, and I won a first place in an art show, our local art show. And so here was something that wasn't pulling together until finally it did. The finale, the finish, was it came together. And sometimes you look at some of the work you've done and you say, gee, I can't remember doing that, but I must have done that, nobody else was around. But that's the way art is, But so I'm going to just take the tape off for now. But this one, I'm going to work on it and I'll show it to you next week. See how I cleaned it up. I spent some time on it today, but we'd really have to give it time to dry out. Just taking the tape off around the edges helps. A little bit, okay? Maybe, huh? Let's see what happens. I tear it on an angle. There you go. So, from a distance, probably it might look okay, but it needs to, all of this needs to dry out, and then we can go back, and then we can add some finishing touches that will bring this whole thing together for us, okay? Right now, this is kind of fuzzy. This is kind of like in no man's land in the background. So that needs a little bit of work in there. This has got some green on in the shadow, so I don't know if I'm going to soften that out. Maybe that could be changed a little bit. But that's what we were doing there. But sometimes, you take a picture and you put it aside and you look at it the next day and you know exactly what it needs to clean it up a little bit and make it look. This one back here, I finished that one. Was working on that one last week, and the cactus plant needed a little bit more filling in. And once I did that, it looks like it's a little bit of a dust storm building up in the background there, but whatever. So anyhow, a little bit more work, and it should be okay. Everything is okay. The placement is okay. It just needs a little bit of oomph to it, and it should come out better. Okay. So I guess until next time, brushes up and happy painting, I guess.